Thank you. Mr. Chabot.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Acting Attorney General, as you mentioned earlier, there are other important matters within the purview of the Justice Department and within the oversight responsibilities of this committee, besides fishing expeditions trying to get the goods on this president in an apparent effort to impeach him. For example, 70,000 Americans died from drug overdoses in 2017. Now, I'm old enough to remember back in the mid-'80s when President Ronald Reagan and his wife felt so compelled to do something about the scourge of drugs in this country that the effort to just say no began and other efforts following that. And that was because back at that time we had 10,000 deaths a year due to drug overdoses, and we now have over 70,000 deaths. So it's gotten, unfortunately, over time, worse, not better. Most of the increase in deaths in 2017 were due to synthetic drugs, synthetic opioids specifically, like fentanyl, which accounted for a significant number of those deaths. This is clearly an epidemic which has been declared a state of emergency nationwide by the President and has deeply affected families in my home state of Ohio as well as families all across this nation. What efforts and resources has or does the Justice Department intend to use to combat this growing epidemic, and what help can Congress provide to assist you in your efforts?
Congressman, I appreciate that question, and I know how Ohio has been dramatically affected by the opioid crisis. We have done a lot at the Department of Justice, and I would like to partner with this committee, and I'm sure General Barr would as well, to combat and have additional tools to combat this opioid crisis. But some of the things that we have done is we set up in 2017 the Opioid Fraud and Detection Unit, which was a way that the Justice Department could utilize data to help combat the devastating opioid crisis. We did the largest healthcare fraud takedown in June of 2018. We set up the PILL Task Force, otherwise known as the Prescription Interdiction and Litigation Task Force, in February of 2018. We set up a really innovative way called Operation SOS, which was synthetic opioid surge. General Sessions and I went down to Tampa, Florida, where we saw Manatee County had taken an AUSA and embedded them once a week into the sheriff's office in order to take every fentanyl overdose case. And they dramatically reduced the number of overdose deaths in Manatee County, and we decided to take that model and apply it to the most affected states and districts that could really make a dramatic difference in saving lives.
Let me just, if I could, let me stop you there. I just have a follow-up question along the same topic. And the President addressed this to a considerable degree in a State of the Union the other night. And do you have an opinion? Is there a relationship between enhancing border security, particularly at our southern border, and making at least some progress in reducing the scourge of drug addiction in this country?
Congressman, absolutely there is a connection between the drugs that are being imported through our southern border, which is a large majority of those drugs, and the opioid crisis we now face. In fact, I went to China in August as Chief of Staff for then General Sessions. He asked me to go to talk to the Chinese about what more they could do to reduce the amount of fentanyl that's being produced in China. And we had a nice dialogue with some high-level government officials. And the President, as you know, has agreed with General Xi to reduce fentanyl and eliminate fentanyl production in China. And one of the ways that China's agreed to do that was by scheduling the analogs of fentanyl. It's a very serious problem, and I know Ohio is dramatically affected by it.
Thank you very much. I've only got about 30 more seconds, so let me just touch on one last thing. I know you've only got a week left, so you probably won't personally...
Less than a week, actually.
Yeah, less than a week. Yesterday, this committee, in a bipartisan manner, passed the No Oil Producing and Exporting Cartels Act of 2019. This is something that I had introduced almost 20 years ago, along with my Democratic colleague, John Conyers, who was chair and ranking member of this committee over the years, that would basically give the Attorney General the authorization to bring suit against oil cartels when they artificially manipulate the prices and we all pay for this at the gas pump time and time again. So I know we've been in contact with the Justice Department, and we look forward to working with your successor in that effort. I don't know if you have any comments you'd like to make about that.
Congressman, I'm fully aware of that bill, and I look forward to the Department of Justice working with you to successfully not only pass it, but implement it.
Thank you. And I'd like to give Mr. Nadler and some of our Democratic colleagues, as well as Mr. Collins and others, a lot of credit for that as well. So thank you very much. Yield back.